Welcome to the latest edition of Beyond the Arc. I'm John Gonzalez alongside our NBA insider, Bill Reiter. And Bill, we debuted the top 100 list the other day with Sam Quinn. People can go back and listen to that.
That was fun.
But today we're going to get into more of it. There's a lot to get into here.
Dude, I know we talked about this a couple days ago. It's a lot of work too. It's a lot of energy to try to come up with just your own individual. There's so much to unpack from this thing.
I love stuff like this. And I spent just a ton of time moving things around. And I think, with a little bit of hindsight here in retrospect, I feel like you and Sam and I felt pretty good about the list as a whole, 1 through 50 especially. And then there's so much variance after that. I mean, there's all of us wanted some do-overs on some guys. But on the whole, I felt like it was a good list.
I think each of our lists felt like we all felt good about our individual lists, and the composite, the CBS list. Yeah, I think it's really well done.
People can check that out on CBSSports.com. There's all kinds of blurbs for each of the guys. The staff did a really good job putting it together and explaining our methodology and what we were thinking. But of course, with stuff like this, it's built to quibble. So we're going to do a little bit of that. We're going to go back and look at that today. Later in the show, we're going to talk about where the youngest players and the oldest players in the league fell on the list on our top 100. We're also going to give some predictions for what might happen next year. But first, we're going to discuss the players who just missed the cut. These are the 10 players who didn't fall in the top 100. They ended up at 101 through 110. 101, Bill, Al Horford. I didn't have him ranked. Did you have him ranked? And what about him just being on the outside?
But as people judge me, understandably, I will just say, I don't know about you, 81, 82 to 110 is brutal. It's so hard. So I had Horford at 90, and I understand that is a product and part of his team, but I think that team, we've seen this obviously when he was with your team, it just brings out the best in him. And the idea of the list is who we think they'll be in the upcoming season, right? What level we think they'll play at. So I just got him in.
Yeah, I mean, Al on either side of 100 in the 90s, or, he ends up at 101. I didn't have him ranked, but he is such a useful player. And especially for the Celtics, for him to be their 6th guy is what a luxury that is. Cause you can trust him. You put him, now look, last year when KP got hurt in the playoffs and they had to play him 35 to 40 minutes a game, he did get exposed a little bit. That's probably a little too much for him. A little.
But he gave him some good minutes. I mean, you're right.
He did.
But he was he wasn't we've seen some guys in the playoffs where guys go down to injuries, other teams, and dudes just shouldn't be out there. He looked his age, but he was still an impactful player.
He's still useful. And he had some moments where he was knocking down threes and you're like, oh, there's Al Horford. I think Al Horford at, his advanced age of mid to late 30s, playing 25 minutes a game, 30 in a pinch. Happy with that.
Sure.
Happy with that. He ends up at 101. Brandon Podziemski, I toyed with him, putting him in. I had him just outside. He ends up at 102. We spent some time on Josh Giddey, who came in at 103 in the show that we did with Sam on Tuesday. You didn't have him ranked, right, Josh Giddey?
Giddey, I did not. Did
you have Podziemski ranked?
I didn't, and I don't have in front. If memory serves, I had him 102 or 103. It was really, really close for me.
I had Giddey just on the inside of the list at 98, and only because, as I discussed with you and Sam on Tuesday, I just think his counting stats are going to be ridiculous. They're a bad team. They're going to give him the ball. His usage rate's through the roof. He doesn't have to worry about playing alongside SGA. I am kind of curious about the fit between him and Kobe White and Zach LaVine, but they went out and got him, and they gave up Alex Caruso for him, and they didn't get any picks for it. So it feels to me like they really like Josh Giddey.
I mean, doesn't it feel like they're going to continue to be bad or mediocre to bad, and he's going to be better because he's going to get those counting? I don't hate him in the 90s. If I didn't slip him in, but I don't hate it.
Yeah, just barely in. And then here's one. We talked about do-overs and wanting some mulligans here. Malik Monk came in at 104.
Me too, dude. So I didn't rank him.
Put him in.
That's the mistake that I made. I
didn't have him ranked.
I have Wiggins in at 100. I'd rather have Monk. I have, whatever. KCP in there, Zach LaVine even. I sort of at the bottom of my list. Jaime Jaquez. Monk's a mistake by me. I should have
I think I would have him in. I would have him in. Like you said, that like 80 to 100 is like really, really difficult. What did I have? What did I have?
Should have late 80s though, right? As I sort of think it through.
I mean, I ranked Anthony Simons.
Yep.
Malik Monk is right in that ballpark. I mean, I'm not going to take out RJ or say Norm Powell, but I did have DeAndre Ayton. We discussed him on the Tuesday show.
I'm not an Ayton guy.
From Dallas, Lively and Gafford made the cut for me. I think probably I would have him. Emmanuel Quickly was number 100 for me. I'd rather have.
I had Anthony Simons in my, and I would have. I screwed up on Monk. I apologize to you, Malik. And I once hung out with him when he was a rookie in New York City for a story at some watch shop, and he could not have been a nicer guy. And I had just moved to New York City, so I didn't know what I was doing. So like you do in real life, I put my suit, my shirt on, and went to the subway. And when I got out of the subway, I was drenched in sweat. Yeah. And he was the only guy who was cool about it. Everyone else, I think it wasn't Rolex, but it was that kind of brand, were very put out. And Malik's like, it's all going to heaven, subway.
It's extremely hot here. I don't know what you want from me. Well, yeah, I mean, Malik Monk, he was barreling towards, we thought, sixth man of the year last year before he got hurt, and Naz Reid ended up with it. And Naz is a fine pick, and I had him ranked pretty high. But Malik Monk is such like an instant offense guy for them coming off the bench. So yeah, I would have thrown him.
I wonder how much of that's out of sight, out of mind for a lot of us, that he just wasn't percolating in my brain the way that he should have been. That's on me. I totally
forgot, and I wish I had. I wish I hadn't. So I'd like that one back. Denny Avdia, he comes in at 105. Andrew Wiggins, who was one of the biggest fallers from year over year, he ends up at 106. This one was interesting for me. Cason Wallace at 107. I don't think he should have been in the top 100, but I do like that he's close because he is so good. And I think he's really underrated and under the radar for a lot of people, because I'm not sure how much people are watching OKC and really tuned into, oh, by the way, Cason Wallace is one of the best defenders on that team coming off the bench on a team full of amazing defenders.
That's the thing. But like, he's the kind of guy that could make a jump. Like, some of these guys that aren't on the list are, to your point, are under the radar guys who might have, relatively speaking, breakthrough seasons where next year they're going to be in the 70s or 80s pretty easily. And then some of these guys, it almost feels like it's obligatory, or I think I said this a couple days ago on the show with Sam and you, where it's almost a pity vote. So Andrew Wiggins, he's a broken man. It is very bizarre what has happened, and some of the, I don't know if it's reporting, but sort of the information, maybe it's misinformation that's out there, but I had him at 100, and Wallace is probably a better bet in terms of what you're going to get this upcoming year than Andrew Wiggins.
We've been waiting for Sam Presti and OKC to like take their grouping of picks and like throw them at another team for a superstar or whatever, right? This roster, though, the Oklahoma City roster, is getting like pretty packed pretty quickly here. But my point here is that if I'm another team, whether it's Lauri Markkanen or whoever they might identify as, hey, let's go out and spend some of this draft capital that we've accrued in order to bring in another star and like really supercharge an already loaded team. If I'm the other team, I'm insisting on Cason Wallace being in that deal.
I'm with you. And we've talked, I just don't think if you're Presti, you need to do that. I don't.
Yeah, you probably, maybe you don't. You're already really good.
Yeah. And like, as you have to pay guys, and as some of these guys get ready for like max contracts that are going to be worth a little more money, and I'm talking like down the road, having super guys valuable. You can plug in, being able to let guys go and just be like, you're really good, but we've got next man up, having the draft. I love Markkanen. They don't need Lauri Markkanen to win an NBA championship.
They don't. But so Sam Presti, is he about to be a victim of his own success here? Because I think what you're saying is right. They've got all these young players. They're on really cheap deals right now. They're going to have to extend a lot of them moving forward. And as that happens, it'll become more expensive and more prohibitive with the new CBA and like the first and second aprons. Fine. So maybe by not going the Lauri Markkanen route, it's better for you financially because you keep your team relatively cheap, compared to other teams.
You can plug holes very affordably.
You don't have to make a move. But then what do you do with all those draft picks? Because you can't take, select, and pay all of them. So what do you do with them? Are you just going to keep kicking it down the road?
So I'm a big believer that GMs have talked me into this idea that basically they operate through fear and through humiliation, the fear of losing their job and past embarrassments. And I wrote a thing on Daryl Morey a few years ago, that made him so mad that he like agreed to have dinner with me. You know how Daryl's the kind of guy where if like he'll like spend time with you if you piss him off, or some GMs will never be around you again. And the story was, and another GM gave this to me, that basically Morey, this did not age well, but wouldn't trade Ben Simmons because he had gotten so ripped off in Houston with Presti that it basically impacted his thinking. It just impacted it. Like he wanted a haul if he was going to move on from when we thought Simmons was good. And in the same line of thinking, I know for a fact that when Harden left Oklahoma City, and over time you had this narrative and real storyline where you had Durant, Westbrook, and Harden, and you let one guy go and then they all eventually left, that it sort of haunted Presti. All of which is to say this, maybe he's just so paranoid about losing some of his stars and having guys want to leave eventually and not be able to keep people, that he just wants all the picks all the time so that he can have a conveyor belt of talent, which he did not have with his old sort of regime when Durant, Harden left, and Westbrook left. They didn't really have a plan, and they tried Paul George, and that didn't work. So maybe some of it's his psychology as a guy that knows where he's a GM, that he wants to have a very steady supply of talent down the line if things go wrong in the years ahead.
And I like the idea, but you can't roster all those picks, right? So eventually, like either he has to move the picks he has for future picks, like just like keep kicking the can down the road, or move some guys off of his roster in order to select these players, because he's got too many picks. He did too good a job.
Look, like Giddey now is sort of a punchline, and you brought up how he's on the list. A year ago, if we'd been doing this podcast a year ago today, the idea that he would just be out in Oklahoma City probably would have felt farcical, right? Like, oh, I don't know. So I think that the longer Sam waits, the longer Presti waits, the more likely it is that he can evaluate his team and figure out who wants to be there, what guys are going to have to get paid. I think he is probably going to err on the side of patience than he is like, let's go get a big name now and push our way to the top.
Yeah, and I think that's prudent. That makes sense. I can't wait to see how he gets out of this really nice problem that he's created.
He said it, yeah. He created it, yeah.
Yeah, he did. Rounding out the top 10 players who just missed the cut, Chris Paul, PJ Washington, and Dylan Brooks. Let's go with Chris Paul. We mentioned this on the Tuesday show. I had him at 81. I thought when I put the list together that you were going to make fun of me for having him that high. Tell people who missed the Tuesday show how high you had him.
All right. Chris Paul and I had a very bad interaction back in the day, and we don't like each other very much. And I have gone on multiple radio stations around America where he happens to play and have gleefully told the story about Chris that is true and not flattering to Chris Paul. We do not like, and I've had GMs and sources and people, assistant GMs, be like, bro, stop with the Chris Paul. Like when he goes to their team, they think it's funny until he goes to their team and I show up at the arena. All of it's just say we hate each other, but I pride myself on not letting that impact being a professional. I have him at 63. Like amazing. I have to have him the highest of anybody that
you have to.
I think I know that he's old. I know that he's slow. I know that his basketball IQ is so high. And whenever I think of him, at least in the regular season, he's always been a crazy ceiling raiser. When he went to the Thunder and it was sort of like a rebuilding tanking time, he just makes teams better. I think Wemby's going to make a huge jump, so I think that is going to lift up. I had Wemby super, super high. Not as high as you. You had him 3. I had him 7.
I had him 3, yeah.
Yeah, I love your pick. I think that's right. Yeah, and I think the overall list undervalues him. So just getting the rock to Wemby is going to stat pad. I think Chris Paul and Pop are a really interesting basketball IQ mix. I think it's the last hurrah for him, but I think it's going to be a really impressive season relative to expectations. And I was sort of shocked he's not on there. I mean, I know he's old, too.
He's still Chris Paul. I mean, he's not dead yet. Like
thank God, he's still doing his thing.
He's still doing his thing. I'm with you.
Look, do his insurance commercials suck? They do, but his basketball doesn't.
He's a good basketball player, and I think he's going to have a good season in San Antonio. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then on the other side, we're going to continue talking through our CBS Sports top 100 NBA players for the upcoming season list, including where the youngest and oldest players landed on the list. We'll do that on the other side. This is Beyond the Arc. All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. John Gonzalez and Bill Reiter here. You can find us wherever you get your favorite podcast. Please download, subscribe, and leave a review. And if you're listening on Spotify, this is new. You can leave us a comment on this episode. If you look below the play button on the Spotify app in full screen mode, you can tell us what you think about the show or leave us a question or comment on the top 100 list. People have had a lot of comments about this, not surprisingly. That's why we do these things. It's super fun for everybody to weigh in on this. Bill, let's get into the top 10 players under 25 and where they fell. Coming in at number 1 for the youngest players on the list was Anthony Edwards at 10. We discussed this a little bit with Sam on the Tuesday show. I love Anthony Edwards. You love Anthony Edwards.
Yeah.
I was a little surprised that he ranked higher than Victor Wembanyama on this list.
So you and I, as we discussed, both had Wemby higher than Ant. I think it's insanity that he is higher than Wemby. But like, I guess if I'm trying to put a positive spin on it for the sake of the list, there's probably a world, John, where Anthony Edwards takes another leap forward, is the or one of the top scorers, let's say, in the NBA, is really good defensively, and the Timberwolves are the number 1 team from the moment that this thing begins, and like he's the best player on the best team maybe in the NBA, right? There's a world where that could happen, I think, with the Timberwolves are one of the best teams, and he's outstanding. I could see him being a guy that gets MVP votes at the end of the year. There are 5 people on that ballot, so the idea that he would be a top 5 player at the end of the year, I don't think is crazy.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, a couple years ago, a friend of mine was like, Anthony Edwards is going to win an MVP. This is a couple years ago. And I was like,
that's a good call.
Out of your mind. And now I'm like, this is happening eventually. I wonder if he gets one before Wemby. And for me, Wemby's upside is just so, he better, because then all of a sudden it's Wemby's to lose.
They're gone.
The foreseeable future. I think for me, the reason why I had Wemby ended up at 12 on the overall composite list. I had him at 3. I just think DPOY looks like it's going to be his for the next, I don't know, 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. Barring, as we talked about a couple days ago, barring something bad that I'm not going to put in the universe. And DPOY starting now, and then when he starts winning MVPs, as you just said, it's going to be like that Mike Trout run, where Mike Trout won every American League MVP in baseball, and when he didn't, he should have.
I think it's going to get to a point where we're going to be looking for reasons not to give it to him. Either
like LeBron or Jordan.
Yeah, where we're just like somebody else, right? Is there somebody else who's having a good season? We're kind of there with Joker now.
We are there with Joker.
It's going to be, hey, is there somebody else that, like, it might be an SGA year where if OKC ends up with the 1 seed, right?
Like in a couple years when he's been passed over a few times, or Wemby's won a few, and it's 3 years from now, and Anthony Edwards is a top perennial 4 player in the game or whatever.
Right. Kind of like how Embiid ends up with 1 and you're like, oh, right. And then you get into the playoffs. You're like, yeah, it's still Joker. But
yeah. Had to give that was the response.
Couple others on the top 10 players under 25. So Halliburton comes in as the 3rd ranked player. He was at 17. Zion was 21 on our list. Tyrese Maxey was 24. He came in, Tyrese Maxey, you're very high on Chet Holmgren. Tyrese Maxey came in ahead of Paolo Banchero, who was 29. Chet Holmgren, who was 30. I think I'd like Chet higher.
If I had to do over again, I had Banchero a couple spots higher than Maxey. I had Maxey at 27. I had Chet at 19, and I felt good about it. And I looked at this list for a long time trying to figure out, can I get Chet ahead of Zion or Ja or Booker or PG? And I have Halliburton really high. I have him 14. And the answer was not yet. But I think Holmgren has the chance to be outstanding this year. Like, I think he could make a huge leap in terms of how people view him. And what you said earlier about Wemby, if it wasn't for Wemby, all these awards we're talking about, because last year, remember, like, it was like who can win the Rookie of the Year, and then Chet, like, oh, Chet's kind of doing it, and then Wemby
took off,
had him by 4,000 yards. That's going to happen. All these other things we're talking about, but it's still going to be Holmgren sometimes. I think in a few years, when there's no Steph and there's no LeBron and KD's gone, like new generation, he could be the 2nd best player in the game, every other year.
I wish I had put Chet higher. He lands at 30 on the list. I had him at 33. I had him behind Maxey. And you know how much I love him. Holmgren, I love Maxey too. But if I could do it over, I'd flip-flop those guys. I had Banchero ahead of Maxey.
I did too.
But I would have moved Chet up that list and moved Maxey down a little bit. And then 3 of the other youngest guys on the list, you have Jalen Williams, who lands at 37. I thought that was really
30.
great.
I'm 30.
I think that's great that you had him 30. I thought that was one of those picks for the composite list that I was really proud of our group, where I was like, okay, this, because we have some people who, obviously, we cover the NBA for a living, but this was one of those things where it's like, if you know, and Jalen Williams deserves to be that high. So I thought we nailed that one. Scotty Barnes at 42. And then this is another one that I was really excited about. Alperen Şengün comes in at 47 on the composite list. I had him at 43 and you had him at
35. That's my osmosis love letter to John Gonzalez. That's you just like, get out of my brain, bro. Because people that don't know, if you've just joined us, you started listening and watching, John loves this guy. Before he got hurt, you were accurately just – so I would watch it. I would watch that team a little – before they made that run at the end of the year where they got kind of hot and almost pushed their way to the playoffs, when they were bad, when he was healthy or they were okay, I started watching more of them on League Pass longer and paying more attention to him because I found out you loved him and you're like, oh, yeah, John's – dude, that dude can ball.
He is very good. I think part of me – sometimes I get my like – NBA League Pass fanboy too much into my like NBA.
I love
get
League
paid
Pass,
to
I get it.
To do analysis. Like because sometimes I'm watching, like I loved to watch the Rockets last year. We might do our NBA League Pass draft. You, me, and Ash, or you, me, and Sam. Some combination coming up. Yeah, before the season begins. They're going to be number one with a bullet for me, along with Oklahoma City. I'm going to have a lot of number ones with a bullet. There's just so many fun players on that team to watch, and he's one of them.
I might take the Spurs pretty high in that draft, though. Like the idea being you can't watch the team if you don't get them, right? Unless they're on national TV.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, like I draft the team so you don't get them, right?
Yeah, I can watch them.
Yeah.
I mean, and by the way, credit to I think Adam Silver in the NBA, and I'm not always look. There's criticism too. The sort of parity or that they're squishing all the teams together. There's a lot of teams that qualify for what you're talking about. Whereas 7 years ago, it might have been 2 teams, might have been a couple teams. But yeah, I had Şengün really, really high.
I love it.
It's the John Gonzalez effect, man.
I can't, between that and where you put Chris Paul, I'm floored. I thought I was going to be the highest on both of those guys, and you beat me out. Roles have been reversed here. Shoe is on the other foot.
One thing I pride myself on, I'm wrong a lot as a result, but I try really hard not to look at other people's lists, not to read other coverage if I'm going to write a column. I try to just like do what I'm going to do. And if I'm stupid, whatever, I'm stupid. Like I don't want to be influenced by other writers until I'm done doing my work.
Yeah, but it was heartening when I looked at the list that, a lot of the people that I find to be very smart and studious and like students of the game who really bore down hard on this, like you and Sam Quinn and Brad Botkin. Like I said, we have such a good team here at CBS Sports. I felt good about my list compared to, where we had the composite. Top 10 players, 35 and older on this list. No surprise here. Steph, LeBron, and KD all top 10. Steph comes in at 6, LeBron at 8, and KD at 9. They're still doing it, Bill. I mean, we saw it in the Olympics. We saw it last season. They're really good still.
So I think they're going to
falls out of the top 10 first,
yeah,
I think.
All of them. I think
really?
Well, I think all right. So I have
you don't think any of them are going to be top 10 next year?
LeBron 8. I have KD 12. So I already have KD out of my and some of that is most of that is sort of durability and injury ability, right? I mean, he was awesome in the Olympics when he came back, but he had to come back, right? I mean, that was a reality. He had to get healthy. I mean, LeBron was the player of the Olympics. Steph was the player of the last couple games in the gold medal game. So I know they still have it, but the Olympics, right? It's 82 games. I think it's a really good question. I think LeBron is much more likely to drop out because either he can get old enough that he's injured, right? Like that could be a thing. He can play. I don't want it to happen, knock on wood, or he could play the games and just the guy is 40 in December. Eventually, age is going to catch up. I still think Steph is dynamic enough and incredible enough, and people love him enough that he'll be 8, 9, 10, maybe could be next year. But John, I wouldn't be surprised if all 3 of these guys are out of the top 10 a year from now.
Well, it's really hard to do, right? I mean, not surprisingly, it is a young man's game. Sports tend to age out the old. Time comes for all of us. For all 3 of them to be top 10 is really impressive and an outlier because the next guy on the list is Jimmy Butler, and he lands at 22. So there's a big gap there where you have like guys who are all under 35.
Wait, where's he at? Where's Butler at?
Jimmy Butler lands at 22. So you have 3 guys
who
are in the top 10, and then you have a massive gap before you get to Jimmy Butler.
I put Jimmy 43.
Okay.
I'm out. He's 22 on the composite list.
I had him at 22. That's where he landed on the composite list as well.
I'm out. Like, I guess I'm just out on the contract situation and how is that? Because the thing about Jimmy Butler, like, there's two reasons I downgraded him. And again, we're sort of betting on what could happen. This is based on what we think they're going to be. One is just injuries, right? Like the possibility that, again, he's just not going to be durable. But I've seen Jimmy Butler outstay his welcome, or whoever's to blame, not get along at the end with the Bulls, with the Timberwolves, Philly, obviously. And I'm sorry to bring this up, chose that Tobias guy, right?
Yeah, like, that was a mistake.
He and look, there's great athletes and coaches who do this. I mean, Jim Harbaugh, Chargers head coach, outstays his welcome a lot of places too, right? So I just think there's a world where, having covered that Heat team, if you don't go along to get along, if you don't follow the Heat culture, you can be difficult, but only in the sort of lane that they allow with Spoelstra and Riley. The wheels can come off really quickly. So I think there's a world where it's a disaster with Butler in Miami.
And you know what? That is probably the safer bet, because as I'm looking at the players 35 and older, Bill, we mentioned the top three who are like, future Hall of Famers and some of the best players of their generation. Jimmy Butler is kind of like the line of demarcation where you go, oh, right, 30. If you're 35 and older, it's hard to be good in the NBA. He lands at 22. You make a really good case for all of a sudden the wheels potentially coming off. Bill, there's only 8 players who made our top 100 who are 35 or older.
That's crazy.
We only had 8. I mean, like, after Jimmy Butler at 22, you have James Harden at 44. You have DeMar DeRozan
really low.
Right. Yeah. You have DeMar DeRozan at 53. Then you have Mike Conley at 85 and Brook Lopez at 88. And then the other 2 guys who are top 10 players, 35 and older, didn't even make the cut. So it's really hard if you're over 35 to be an impact player in the NBA. And there's a reason why a lot of those guys didn't make our list.
What's the line of demarcation on who's just not going to be any good next year? Like Horford?
Well, Al Horford finished just outside at 101.
I still think he'll be a good player this year. I guess he's a role player, so it's different than what's being asked of Butler.
The fall off line, I mean, I think, is that the James Harden line for you?
Yeah, maybe Butler, maybe Harden. I've got Harden down at 60 or something like. Yeah, he's 60 for me.
Because I think, it's hard when you're asking it that way. Like, I think DeMar DeRozan will still be DeMar DeRozan. Yes. Mike Conley is still a useful rotation player, so he's not like somebody that you're really, counting on. Like they went and got Dillingham. I think they can sort of phase him out. So I'm going to even put him to the side a little bit. And we talked about this with Sam. I thought Brook Lopez was criminally underrated on our list. He ended up at 88, Adam at 67. So I think
where DeMar DeRozan end up?
53.
Okay, I have him at 42. I have him higher than Jimmy Butler. I don't know if I like the fit for them, for the Kings, but I like the fit for him, right? I think like it's a good fit for him.
So I guess it would kind of be the Jimmy Butler, James Harden grouping where we go, are those 2 guys going to be close approximations to what they've been previously? Or do we expect like this is going to be the year where we go, oh, okay, they're taking a big step back now?
Who do you think will be the highest ranked of these guys, including Steph, LeBron, and KD next year, a year from now when we do this list?
Steph for me.
Yeah,
I think Steph stays where he is.
I agree. I kind of pause on LeBron a little bit though, right? Because it's just he's so.
If I had to make a wager here, I would still bet on Steph, LeBron, and KD being in the top 10. But on our composite list, guys like Anthony Edwards and Victor Wembanyama weren't in the top 10. So you got to make space for them because you would expect that those guys will move up next season. So it's going to get difficult. I have a hard time betting against LeBron though, because look, we just saw an otherworldly effort during the Olympics where literal gray beard LeBron was like, I got this, and you're going to go here and you're going to go there, and I'm going to play point forward LeBron. And you and I have discussed this a little bit. I'm really looking forward to golden years LeBron, where he slows down a little bit physically, but is still thinking the game better than most people.
Is this the last year and the first year ever next year where LeBron James is ranked lower than Anthony Davis on all the lists that are out there? Because I have LeBron 8 and AD 9. I had AD a little higher, I think, than
I had them right next to each other. I think I had AD 11. I had LeBron just ahead of Kevin Durant.
Okay.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I had Kevin Durant ahead of LeBron. The composite list had LeBron ahead of KD, so I had him one spot. But they were basically in that same age, or that.
I think this is the last year the Lakers can pretend and hope that LeBron's can be the best player on that Lakers team. This is it. Good luck, Lakers.
Godspeed to the Lakers. All right, we're going to take one more break, and then on the other side, we're going to discuss the teams that had the most players land in our top 100. There's some that you would expect, and then one team that I think is going to kind of blow people away. And then we're going to do some predictions for our top 100 next year, because it's never too soon to do those things. This is Beyond the Arc.
Today, with the support of the NFL, a new playbook is being written. The National Gay Flag Football League provides inclusive play for over 4,000 LGBTQ plus players and allies. Here is a home with no penalty for being you.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. If you're watching us on YouTube, welcome. If you're not, if you're listening on a podcast form, you can find us on YouTube. Our page is at Beyond the Arc CBS. Please hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. NBA teams that had the most player picks. The Knicks with 6, Bill. I think that we'd expect that because they're so deep. The Thunder was 6. Yeah, right? Okay. I mean, they're so deep. We talked about that earlier. The Celtics, all top 5 of their guys, they landed here. Here's the one that kind of surprised me. Okay. The Pelicans had 6.
That's interesting. So Herb Jones is one of those guys that's probably low on the list. Ingram, Zion.
Yeah.
And Zion's what, top 20, top 25 on the composite. So it's not like
I think he was 21.
Not all guys in the 50s and 60s. Who am I forgetting? That's pretty.
Trey Murphy
McCollum on there.
Trey Murphy and CJ McCollum and DeJounte.
Oh yeah, I mean, all right, of course, the trade.
So
they could be. I'm trying to remember. Were they top 4 last year for big stretches, right? Until kind of the wheels came off. Weren't they competitive?
They were flirting in that. Could they potentially get into having a home playoff game, and then they slipped a little bit. But the reason why, at first I was like, that's too many. And then you go by player, and you're like, no, of course, all 6 of those guys should be in the top 100, which leads me to the question, are we too low on the Pelicans, or is it just that the Western Conference is so loaded that maybe we shouldn't be higher?
Bingo. I think that's so. Would you qualify them as a surprise? I think the West is deep enough that there is a team that can be surprising enough next year to finish 2 or 3 that we don't really see coming, or a team that we sort of thought was a play-in team that finishes 4 or 5. I think this is right. The Pelicans ceiling is 2 or 3. I mean, they'd have to get a lot of help, and someone would have to really, a team would have to have an injury or really disappoint. But I think they've had seasons when Zion was healthy in the past where they've been really, really good until he's gotten hurt. CJ McCollum's kind of getting old and isn't the same player, but I love the addition of Murray. I don't really buy it. They're like 5 to 7 for me, but I could see them overachieving my expectations.
Yeah, for me, the ceiling would be closer to they replaced the Clippers in that 4-5 range. They have that kind of season. I still think that there's a pretty sizable gap between the other top teams in the Western Conference. But the reason why I thought it was notable is because when you look at these other teams with the most players on our top 100, the Knicks expected to be pretty good, battle the Celtics in the Eastern Conference. The Thunder, everybody's going to have them as the favorites. They're the odds-on favorites to win the Western Conference or be right there in that 1-2-3 mix. The Wolves, right there in that 1-2-3 mix. The Celtics, their top 5 is amazing. They're the favorites to win the Eastern Conference. The Pelicans was that one outlier where I was like, but just because they're deep, right? I mean, those guys like CJ McCollum, you made a good point on him. Brandon Ingram, he's angling for a new contract, but now with the new CBA, what's his actual worth? They have a lot of good players, but they only have one star.
I can do this too if we're interested. I would be interested in going through every team, ranking their top 5 players and averaging out, right? What is the average?
Oh yeah, that's good.
Right, because you'd have to give, I guess, if you have a player that's not ranked as your 4th or 5th best player, they could be 110. But I mean, the Knicks are going to be, I think, pretty high. I think that's going to be a pretty highly ranked team. I think the Celtics are obviously most of these guys outside of Zion are 40s, 50s, 60s kind of. So it's not as if it's a bunch of dudes in the top 30.
A bunch of the other teams that came in sort of in the middle of the pack, or teams that you'd expect teams with 4 players on the list, the Bucks and the Cavs and the Grizzlies and the
Bucks,
Magic and the Mavs, teams that are good, the Nuggets, teams that you're expecting to just be really good this year. This one I thought, because when we talk about expectations and which teams we think will be good and challenge, right? We talked about the 76ers overhauling their team and potentially competing with the Knicks and the Celtics for the Eastern Conference, or at least pushing the Celtics, right? They only had 3 players on the list in the top 100. And that's right. Like, it should only be 3. And yet the Knicks have double that and the Celtics have 5. So like the Sixers have some really good role players that they've surrounded Embiid and PG and Tyrese Maxey with, but they don't have that same top line talent.
They're a better version of the Lakers, right? The Lakers have, I think, 2 top on my list, top 10. I think it's top 12 or something.
They also had 3 players make the list.
Right. But they're top heavy. I mean, where did Embiid come in on the 5? Probably. I think I had him
5.
I mean, they have a top 5 player. They have a guy in Paul George who's top 15 for me. And there's a guy in Tyrese Maxey who I don't think it's unreasonable, not a lock, that a year from now, this upcoming season, he could surprise and he could be a top 15 or 20 player. So, and you and I talked about this a lot. We also like the non-top 100 players they filled that team out with. I mean, they're not a bunch of bums. It feels like the right guys in the right fit. So it's just going to require those 3 guys to carry Philly to what are massive expectations. But I don't think it bodes as badly for them as, say, the Raptors having whatever. 3
guys. The top only having 3 guys, not all 3 guys, groups of 3 guys are equal, right? Obviously the Sixers 3 guys and the team that they put around it is considerably better than the Raptors 3 guys and the team they have around them. And you mentioned the Lakers. The Lakers, not surprisingly, have 3 guys. The Suns, the same deal. It's their big 3, but then the teams around them are a little bit different. I think danger comes in with teams like the Clippers have 2. That's not great for them.
And one of them is James Harden.
And one of them is James Harden.
I mean, and the other may not play because he's Kawhi Leonard. A lot.
Right. So all of it,
what
do
the Spurs have? What the
Spurs had
get
2.
to? Okay.
Spurs had 2, Devin Vassell and Wemby, obviously. And you and I would have had 3 because of Chris Paul, but he didn't make the composite list. When we did our over-unders, the Clippers were still grouped in, according to Vegas, a team that projects to be a playoff team this year and be in the mix in the Western Conference. If not an actual playoff team, then a play-in team. As we're looking at this now, Bill, with 2 guys, one of whom is Kawhi and the other whom is James Harden, we just talked about him being 35 and older. Is this the year that the Clippers fall apart?
I hope I went under. You were talking, and I was just thinking.
I know. Now we got to go back. Can we both go back retroactively?
Yeah. They're going to be garbage. I think, like, as we sort of think about it in the light of day, they're going, and they're in that brand new arena, which I know most people don't care about, but the owner does. Steve Ballmer.
The owner does.
Yeah. And the timing of this team falling apart and the West becoming an absolute machine. I mean, just 1 to, I don't know, 12. I mean, yes, they can miss the playoffs. How's that for a crazy bold prediction?
That is a crazy.
They can miss the play.
Somebody has to fall in the Western Conference, especially if we expect teams over time, the Spurs, to ascend. I don't think it'll be this year, but
I do. Or
I know you're super high on them.
I think they can win. I think they can be in the upper 30s and be pushing at I think they can be what Houston was last year.
Yeah.
Where. They're coming up.
I think Houston might take a step forward, but we should also mention that every team in the NBA had at least 1 player in the top 100, including Bill. The Blazers had 2. The Jazz, the Nets, the Pistons, and the Wizards all had 1. Well, how do you feel about the Blazers, who are going to be the worst team in the NBA, having 2 players on the top 100?
I feel like I want to look at my list, and you know what? I think I had I apologize. I was wrong. If I put
so we had
Blazers
Anthony
on there,
Simons and who else was the other? Was it DeAndre?
I did not put Ayton. Did Ayton make the composite list? I can look.
I think he must have made the composite list. I had him.
It's got to be right. I did not have him.
Oh, Jeremy Grant. Sorry, Jeremy Grant.
That's
right. Ayton didn't make it. Yeah, Jeremy Grant. He deserves to be in it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, those guys, but they have 2, but they're in the 90s, right? I mean, their average rank would be not if we assigned 110 as their, or even 101 for the ranking. If you don't get there, their average team ranking would be 97 or something, or 98. So
yeah, and some of these guys
price.
for these other teams, I mean, obviously Lauri Markkanen's going to make it for the Jazz, Nick Claxton for the Nets, Cade Cunningham for the Pistons, and then Kuzma for the Wizards. So I don't have any quibble there. Let's do some questions / predictions for next season before we wrap it up here. Question for you, Bill. How long until Wemby's number one?
So I actually think that a year from now, it is absolutely realistic that some of our 8, 9, 10 voters will vote him number one, including maybe me and or you. I think.
Yeah, I had him 3.
You're a year from it being possible that people really, it's a legitimate conversation. And I think we're 2 years from it just being the way that it is.
I mean, and then for a while, like we were talking about earlier in the show, where it's like, okay, now we're looking for reasons not to have him one, not to make him MVP, not to make him DPOY. Sky's the limit for him. Next year, yay or nay, LeBron top 10?
Nay. No. All right, here's part of the reason why. Like, Zion can make a leap. Ja can. So, like, not just LeBron going down, but someone making a big leap forward, taking him over, right? Zion's a guy that could make a huge leap. Ja, Chet, there's Maxey. There's a bunch of guys who are capable of being better than, I think, next year, better than I think LeBron will be this year. And obviously LeBron is likely to be a little bit less effective since he will be a 40-year-old soon. So no, I'll take him on. I'll say he's 14 or 15 next year.
I had him 9. I'm with you. I think he's going to be outside the top 10.
8.
But if he falls to 12, 14, 15, I think that's like probably his basement, which is just like, it's insane. It's insane how good he is.
Is there a world where he tries to condition his body and his play for 2 or 3 years longevity rather than excellence over these 82 games because he wants to stretch out in his own mind the time he can play with Bronny once Bronny in his own mind actually starts getting playing time?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think he's going anywhere. He doesn't have to unless he wants to, unless LeBron decides. I don't think it's going to be performance-based when he decides to hang it up, at least not if he hangs it up sooner rather than later, because he's obviously still very, very, very good. If he wants another 5 years, he could do it.
Also, he's LeBron. He loves attention. He's going to have at least a 2-year announced goodbye so he can get all the shine. So he's got at least 2 years left because he would have he's going to want to announce it so that he gets all. He's going to have a farewell year, which by the way, I hate them. Do you like? I think it's obnoxious. I didn't like the Kobe farewell year. Am I allowed to say that?
Farewell.
I don't know, man.
I don't mind. I mean, they're amazing players, and if you want to get celebrated, it's cool by me. I mean, like there's not many Tim Duncans left who are just gonna like vanish into the ether.
just go. I'm gonna go work on my cars.
That's not gonna be. It's definitely not gonna be LeBron. Whatever's next for him is gonna be highly visible. Here's something for you. None of this year's rookie class made the list.
Yes.
Who will be the first rookie to make the list?
This is always hard because we probably should have some of these rookies, although it's not a great class. I'll go with Stephon Castle. Maybe is that a reasonable?
That's not bad.
I think they're going to be good. I mean,
I like Stephon Castle. I think, I really liked what Reed Shepherd looked like in Summer League. The problem is there's so many players on that team. That team is starting to get the Rockets are starting to get overloaded on their roster.
Doesn't translate either sometimes, right? Like the Summer League.
Here's one. I think, and you were kind of laughing at me about this previously, but I'm like, my love for him grows leaps and bounds by the day. I think he could be the rookie of the year, and I think he'll be the first guy on the list. It's Zach Edey.
I mean, it's an interesting fit, right? It's so funny. He's so, I don't hate it. I mean, I think I did big, but like there's some people who hate him on that team.
I know.
And it's a perfect fit. I mean, look, he's not going to get out in transition. I'm not even sure he can make it to the other side of the floor in like 3 minutes.
But if he just cherry picks, think about all the blocks and rebounds he'll get.
Yeah. But they need, like, positionally, it's the position they needed to fill, and they got him with some. Yeah, Edey's a good one. I mean, there will be 3 or 4 guys that we're not even thinking of, or 1 or 2 that we're not thinking of, plus the guys we've mentioned, who will be on the list next year and be surprises.
I just think with Edey, he's going to get a lot of playing time. And if he ends up as rookie of the year, it's going to be hard for us not to put him on the list next year. All right, last one for you before we wrap this up. Who's the name that surprised, like in the same way that we had all those big drops, Wiggins dropped off the list, Chris Paul dropped off the list. Who's the name that next year?
Ooh.
He's ranked this year. He's not going to be ranked next year, and he's a pretty big name. I'll give you some options here. Clay came in at 99 on the composite. Brooke Lopez was 88, too low for me. Marcus Smart, 93. Beal was 69.
Off the list completely.
Off the list, not ranked.
Harden.
He was what, in the 40s, right?
Yeah, I think Harden could be off the list. I mean, maybe not. It could be a bad pick because if Kawhi is hurt all the time and Harden just gets a bunch of empty calorie stats. But I think there's a world where he falls apart.
Where are you on Beal? Because this is, for me, a pivotal year for him.
Yeah, what did Sam say a couple days ago? That he thought that Brad, like that Beal, they were like this team and situation obscured his ability. Respectfully disagree. I think there's a world where he's just straight washed on a team that is broken, where Kevin Durant wants to leave but doesn't know how to do it because he's forced his way out of 14 other teams already in his career, where Booker's put out, where there's no depth, and where the owner obviously doesn't know what he's doing, has expectations that are insane. And that kind of toxic reality is hard enough when you're good. Like when you're Devin Booker, it's really hard when you're. So I could see Beal having a terrible season.
Well, good luck to the Suns. It should be a great time for them. And this was a good time for us. We had we enjoyed going through the top 100 list. Again, I remind everybody that you can find that full list at cbssports.com. It's really well done. A lot of work went into it. There's blurbs for every individual player. Go and spend some time with that. And if you missed our top 100 breakdown from Tuesday, go back and listen to that or watch it on YouTube. Sam and Bill and I had a good time with that. Bill and I are going to be back next week talking about, Bill, it's getting close, man.
I know it's coming.
Teams are going to start reporting. Then we've got training camp. Then all of a sudden there's preseason games. We're not far removed from this thing.
It is around the corner.
It is around the corner. All right. Well, everybody enjoy your weekend. We'll be back, as I mentioned, next week. But for now, for our NBA insider, Bill Reiter, I am John Gonzalez. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.